Hey guys, so this is another Resolute TV exclusive. We are about to give you the uncut version of the interview that Dean McCrae conducted with Father Chris Yates on the very controversial drama regarding George Cardinal Pell. I hope you enjoy.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, episode 2, Resolute TV. We've got our father with the good hair. That was one of the comments last week. So Father Chris Yates, thanks for coming back on board, mate. Probably very apt considering things that have been going on in the Catholic world. And I figure we're gonna touch on that. For anybody who knows me, knows my thoughts on abuse of anybody, really. I value consent above just about anything that there is. Personal consent, but I do believe solidly that children can't give consent. Children need to be safeguarded and looked after as much as humanly possible. All the stuff that's going on with obviously you're a separate part of the Catholic Church, as to a degree. Is that a fair?
Yeah, but it's one faith. I mean, I think we can't look upon. And we're very close to the Roman Catholic Church, as you'd know. We can't look at these things dispassionately. Obviously, it should go without saying, but it doesn't anymore. But abuse of anybody is evil, not just children. There are vulnerable adults that can't consent. That's why the church is teaching on marriage, which is very unpopular. And because it's difficult, I know, I'm a divorced priest, it's very unpopular, but it does rather include consent, and it's, of course, even within marriages, there can be non-consensual acts that are evil and wrong and criminal. But no, we don't look dispassionately on any of this stuff. And also there are matters that arise from what's happened with Cardinal Pell, which are directly relevant to any Christian, or to be honest, any person of faith, or even anybody that doesn't want to follow the modern ideology, postmodern ideology, I should say.
Well, I guess my concern or my view is it's obviously been dragging out. I've sort of stayed away from the topic. There's a lot of things I have big opinions about. This is one I've stayed away from for a couple of reasons. One, I don't know enough about the details. I'm not passionate enough about that faith or that individual to look too hard into it. Where I see concern is if he is innocent, he should be treated innocent until proven guilty. If he is guilty, he should be dealt the full force of the law. And whatever happens to you in prison, that happens to you if you have done these things. I believe that's karma. But I've stayed away from it.
I do believe in consequences.
Karma, consequence. I think there are similar ways of looking at things. I suppose there's a line, but I mean, I've stayed away from it. It's not an area that I'm strong in. But as a father, as yourself, and you're a very learned, very intelligent man, what's your initial take of the whole thing? And sure. What we can do is after we sort of discuss that initial bit, we can go into more detail later, which we might add on to the uncut episodes later on or something. So if you're happy to do that, Father.
Yeah, so, I'll begin by saying that I have the skin in the game I've described. I mean, I'm a conservative Catholic Christian, but I don't have the skin in the game in as much as I've never met Cardinal Pell. I've never been. He's never had authority over me. I've never been. I've never reported to him. Never met him. So there's. Even though I can feel terribly for, and I'll go on to describe why, for what he's endured, that's not because I have any personal relationship or compromise in any way. I've looked at this from the get-go. Those who watched last week will know I was a policeman for 10 years. And so from the get-go, I and still, my philosophy in these matters is, what's the evidence? So people say all sorts of things. People remember things wrongly, differently. there's all sorts of studies on false memory, these sorts of things. So I don't want to question the and I don't want to question the motives of anybody involved in this, but I do think there are some fundamental legal errors, because I'm talking from a legal standpoint now, that, there are moral arguments and there are legal arguments, and they intersect. And this is why it's so messy, because they are almost impossible to separate. And so none of my kind of analysis of what's happened with Pell is to in any way suggest that people who have been victims of abuse or who have had crimes committed against them shouldn't come forward and be heard and listened to and taken very seriously. They absolutely should. But I think this was touched on in Pell's interview with Andrew Bolt. There is a difference between that and saying, what the Premier of Victoria has said, oh, well, I believe you. Just a blanket, I believe you. Yeah. If by that we mean we will accept your account, and help you to make your account, which is a police officer's job when taking a statement, be it video or written, is to help somebody tell the truth. That's the job. And so, and it is, and it's been said a lot, but we make this vow, or we certainly do the oath when we join the police in Britain. I'm pretty sure it's the same here, without fear or favour, malice or ill will. So the purpose of a police officer engaging with somebody for the purposes of making a statement is to help them tell the truth. And ultimately they sign that statement, be it a video one or a written one or an audio one. They sign to say that this is the truth. Yeah. And so the job is to help people tell the truth. Now, there is eternal truth, which is objective, but all of us, for our truths, are subjective to our own interpretations, to our experiences. So if you and I, Dean, witness the same incident, we should actually make a different statement, because we're not the same, and we will have seen it differently, and therefore your statement is true and my statement is true as I have understood it, and all I can do is express my truth. Yeah?
Yes. Yeah. You can only interpret it from your eyes. It's very hard to interpret something from somebody else's eyes.
And so when somebody in making such a statement to the police discloses that something that breaches the criminal code has occurred, a police officer's job is to gather all available evidence. A police officer should never have an opinion on guilt or innocence. That's not a police officer's duty, role, to be honest, even judges very rarely are called to make that decision. In the criminal standard, it goes to juries. And so it's certainly not a police officer's job, nor a prosecutor's job. Police officers are duty bound, legally bound, to gather all available evidence, both for and against the prosecution. So the police should never be on anybody's side.
Yep, 100%. Well, of the community, not the...
Because the law is not on anybody's side other than dispassionate legal justice. Okay?
Yep.
What's happened in the Pell case is we've had this merger of national mourning and grieving over actually horrific things that have been done by people, not just the church, lots of institutions that have damaged the most vulnerable amongst us. And there's
which we do have to acknowledge the church has had a history of poor performance in this area.
Precisely because it incites passion so strongly within us is the reason that we need to appeal to our legal system, which is dispassionate.
Yes. It's easy to get emotional about this stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, in my police experience, I had to arrest paedophiles. I searched their houses, had to, secure the evidence that would convict them. That is not a pleasant job. It's a horrible job, and you'd be inhuman, I think, as a man, to say, you don't have those fleeting feelings of wanting to tear their eyes out,
Oh, I get it. Yeah. 100%.
Well, you gather evidence, and you can see that, in fact, they have abused children, like because you've seen the evidence, but it's not been tested before a court or any of that stuff yet. But of course, if all police officers did was take paedophiles back to the police station whilst they're investigating things and beat them up in an interview room, They'd all be found innocent.
Which an awful lot of Australians would go, yes, beat the piss out of pedophiles in an interview room. The problem being is the ongoing that, or if for example it was found they were later innocent and some poor bloke's been towelled up, or somebody's been wrongly accused, or whatever. I guess that'd be the hard bit. The average Australian goes pedophile, smash them, absolutely.
But just as wicked is that actually, if police officers did that, took summary justice, so to speak, towards people that they're investigating, then actually it would destroy the investigation and be far less likely to result in a conviction. That's why it has to be dispassionate, without fear or favour, malice or ill will. Not because we want to take the side of anybody, in fact we're not supposed to, but so that if somebody is guilty, they will be found guilty. If somebody's innocent,
for it to work within our current system as it stands, that's how it needs. That's the most appropriate way for it to be dealt with.
And it's been that way pretty much since Magna Carta, and the Bill of Rights and all of those things that our common law is shaped by, and that statute law is shaped by as well in stated cases. And so it's this idea of dispassionate investigation that people find so difficult, and actually is not what Pell experienced. So now this isn't about Pell. This is about how things are investigated. It just so happens to be that a cardinal of the church was the one at the sharp end of this. Now, the other thing I want to say about the justice system, this is all background. I'm happy to talk about the specifics, but I think the background is so important, is that when we talk about the justice system, we've begun to talk about, understandably, victims and perpetrators.
Yeah.
The problem with that is you can only talk about victims and perpetrators post-sentence.
Yes.
Because until a case is judged, and as we've seen, that includes up to the High Court if necessary. Until the case is judged, you only have the plaintiff, or the one that brings the charge. Now, police charge people, prosecutors charge people, but they are representatives of the person who alleges something has happened. So I have to allege, Dean, that you stole, my Bible because you're so obsessed.
I did, and the wine, definitely the wine.
So I make an accusation in doing so. Okay, and the police's job is to gather the evidence for or against that. Simple as that. Now, it would be wrong for the whole world to call you a victim. Sorry, to call me a victim of theft until that had been proved beyond a reasonable doubt in court, or proved in any way, shape, or form. And so this is the problem we've got into. So we see it as, if you like, the victim can only be right, because victims are always right. Perpetrators can only be wrong, because perpetrators are always wrong. But in a legal process, you don't have a victim and a perpetrator. You have somebody making an allegation and somebody responding to that allegation. Yeah.
And that's where we've seen over the last few years, particularly where you've got the Me Too movement, you've got the Believe All Women movement, you've got the Not All Men movement, you've got all these sort of things, and they don't.
They're prejudicial. So and by the way, I'm not on the side of any group that wants to lobby to say the opposite either. That shouldn't be believed, or absolutely not. Everybody's account has to be listened to and presented, and the police's job is to do just that. Now, what failed in Pell's case is they didn't ask basic questions. I from the outside looking in, I probably, like many people, thought, well, there must be more to it. On the face of it, I can't see what the case is, but obviously I'm not the investigating officer. I don't have the court file. I wasn't present when all the evidence was presented. There must be more to it. Well, the High Court has shown that there wasn't any more to it. Yeah. And Andrew Bolt's walked people through it, that what was alleged, and he was only on trial for what was alleged, not for all the sins of all the people that ever lived, or for any of the rumors or other accusations that have flown around about him.
And these things stick with people. And so when you see the mainstream media, and I have a rocky relationship at best, they come up with a lot of stuff that's hype.
Well, if anybody wants if anybody wanted a concrete example of that, how about the fact that the week before this judgment was to be delivered, Revelation, Sarah Ferguson, puts out an 1.5-hour long episode about other allegations against Cardinal Pell. It was an episode about George Pell when a judgment was being considered and about to be delivered. The week before.
Which
On
clearly
the day
creates a bias.
Yeah, on the day that his interview with Andrew Bolt was to be broadcast, the ABC, and the Victoria Police for that matter, report that they're considering other charges against Pell.
Yeah.
Well, do I know whether Pell is guilty or innocent? It doesn't matter. People's opinion on that is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Accusations have to be backed up with evidence. When Pell was interviewed in the Vatican, he said to the police, well, that's impossible. It couldn't have happened because X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
That if I was a policeman, we miss things all the time. And actually, it's a gift when somebody actually responds in an interview, because you have a right of silence. When somebody responds in an interview, that gives you a whole additional line of inquiry. If somebody's coming up with some alibi that you can derail, that's proof of their guilt. So you want to do that. Or if their alibi is sound, that's proof of their innocence. Either way, you've got to put it before the jury or before the prosecutor.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you go, right, oh gosh, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, I will go and try and find those other choir boys. I will try and find those 20-odd people that saw him on the steps at the front of the cathedral when he was supposed to be in the sacristy committing a crime. And they just didn't do it. Or if they did it, they didn't report it. Either way, it's not justifiable.
It's a hole. It's a hole.
Let me ask the question. I don't know the ins and outs of it. I'm just asking the question. But clearly, the High Court thought that there was big problems with that. The fact that, yes, we want to accept the account of the person bringing the allegation, and I agree with that, and that they're called a credible witness, and I've got no reason to disagree with that whatsoever. But also, his masters of ceremony, the two people that accompanied him at every service when vested, which is standard practice for an archbishop, or for any prelate, to be honest, any bishop. The fact that their account wasn't discredited. So you can have at the same time credible accounts that oppose one another.
Yes.
And that's what the court's for. And all the reasonable doubt is if there is a credible reason not to convict. And the criminal justice system is geared that guilty men walk free rather than innocent men go to jail. Guilt or innocence in the eternal sense is a matter for God. In Pell's case, you asked me just before I came on the show, Dean, whether I thought he was innocent or guilty. And that's an impossible question to answer.
Of course.
Christians believe that in general, we are all innocent and guilty at the same time. We believe in sin. We believe we're not perfect. And so we're all guilty of not loving God as much as we should. We're all guilty of not loving our neighbor as much as we should. This would come into that category, loving God and neighbor. Clearly, it's not of God's will that we abuse people. And so the answer is I don't know. But what I do know is that Pell was partly, or certainly the media trial of Pell was precisely because he is a conservative Catholic. And, the postmodern media, the world generally in the West, don't like that. They don't like the fact that he's anti-abortion. They don't like the fact, that he believes in hell. But one thing we can say about somebody who holds those views is that they do believe in a particular judgment, an individual judgment. And this should stir your libertarian soul. In fact, Senator Lionhelm, who I used to work for, said this about Christianity, and I think I really appreciated his reflection on this, is that he's not a Christian, or wasn't a Christian then. He might have changed his mind in the last couple of weeks. I hope so. But he said, as an atheist, he admires that Christianity believes in a final individual judgment, where we are individually called to account for what we have done and what we have not done. And a conservative Christian like Cardinal Pell, like me, believes that, in fact, one of the consequences of that personal judgment is hell.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think that's a worldview that's not very well understood or appreciated, but one that would point towards a person who would have a conscience. Because the only way to escape the fires of hell is to be truly contrite. You can't be truly contrite if you're you know, lying to the people, if you're not going guilty at court when you know you are, and then trying to wriggle out of it by going to a confessional. It doesn't work that way, you know. And so so I think that does point towards a hint towards innocence in this case.
I would say there is a natural devil's advocate argument would be there have been other conservative Catholic priests in various situations who have come out in hindsight and been guilty as sin, as they say.
Absolutely.
That's right. So their fear of hell allegedly didn't stop them from doing what they've done.
Absolutely.
That's where I guess that's where the critics to that argument would come forward, I'm sure, very enthusiastically and go, but some priests have, that makes them all guilty. And I don't know, I wasn't there. If, in my humble opinion, which nobody who knows me would consider me too humble, but if he is guilty and he believes in hell, hopefully he gets the full wrath of whatever that entails. If he is innocent, it's completely wrong for his name and his reputation and his everything he's worked for to be besmirched. And that's the area that I really worry about, is with the whole trial by media, trial by public. A lot of people have jumped on this and gone, that bastard needs to die. And I'm sorry, have you actually done any of the evidence, or are you listening to the media? And then some are going, and again, it's about the evidence.
And that's precisely why we have a criminal justice system that's dispassionate, because it's very hard to be dispassionate in these circumstances, you know, and two things can be apparently true at once. You know, I mean, we tend to have zero-sum approaches to all things in life these days, which is so stupid. You know, and so the other thing I would say about Cardinal Pell, and it sounds like I'm his kind of, you know, advocate for the defense, but I'm not. I'm kind of sick of the character assassinations that go on. But one of the things I'd say is that all sorts of things may have happened when he was a junior priest in the Diocese of Ballarat, and we don't know. You know, I wasn't alive. I was born in 1980. You know, so
81.
Yeah, there you go. So you know, I wasn't alive, and I don't know. What I would say is that when he was made a bishop, which I think was in the mid-90s, he was the first person to set up anything to deal with this issue from within the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Now, actually, I'm surprised that Sarah Ferguson didn't mention that, because it might point towards the idea that he may have known stuff was going on, and actually, as soon as he was in a position of authority, he thought, "I'm going to deal with this stuff.
I'm going to try and tackle the problem." You know?
So actually, it works both ways. It cuts both ways. It casts him in a positive light, in as much as, well, he did something and other people weren't doing anything. And on the other hand, well, why did he do something? You know?
and it's the same. You know, the people who are out there going, "This bastard deserves to die," blah 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 blah. I can fully internally feel I can be a hothead. You know, if you violated children, yes, you know, go hard. But then the other side, you can see people protecting their faith, and they're protecting free speech, and they're protecting innocence innocence before guilt.
I think a lot of people, it would appear, are quite happy with mob justice and with trial by media, unless it's them. Unless it's them that are at the sharp end of it. And then they want a fair trial. They want fair treatment by the police. You know, and actually, it should not be that an accused in a case is begging the police to go and gather evidence. You know, it shouldn't be that way around. You know,
that's your taxpayer-funded job, boys and girls. Sorry, go and collect evidence. That's what you do.
Yeah. So look, I mean, I think a lot has been said about the approach. It serves nobody to have an approach that fails in its duty to gather evidence and to present it. You know, to charge people with offences that you can't prove is not good, and it leads to all this kind of hysteria. What I would like to say is that the outcome of this, what's been really encouraging for me in the outcome of this, is I was very impressed by the statement of Jay in this, the plaintiff in this case. I was very encouraged by that. That they don't want this to define them. That in fact, this has been an ordeal for them. I agree. The criminal justice system is always an ordeal. If you're going to bring a case against a person that could result in their incarceration, it kind of has to be an ordeal.
Yeah.
That's not something.
A lot of weight to carry.
Yeah, and actually, Cardinal Pell's response as well, which is there's been hurt enough in all of this. I've got no bitterness, and I believe it. Actually, I mean, when I read the statement, I thought, well, he said the right thing. But actually, when I saw him interviewed, he didn't strike me as bitter, which is amazing. I would be. I'm not as virtuous as that.
I can't imagine I would be. I mean, look, and in my head, I compare things like this to, Adam Reynolds, the football player, recently had all these allegations that were all found to be completely false. But up until that point, his name was mud, and the mob justice jumped on him, and then now they're all going, oh, well, it's kind of sorry, but in 20 years' time in the world of the internet.
The mob wanted to say, I don't care what anyone in the church thinks, he's been found guilty and therefore he's guilty. I agree with them, but it can't be both ways. He's now been exonerated by the High Court, and you can't then say, oh, well, he's still a paedophile. It's just not on.
Then it's very hard to take back those claims. So, I mean, for Adam Reynolds or Cardinal Pell or whoever the case may be, once those allegations are out there digitally, in 20 years' time, Adam Reynolds or whoever the case may be, their children, when they Google daddy or mummy, if depending on the scenario, this stuff comes up. Daddy, did you really do that? Daddy, did you?
Well,
is it true you were?
Where social media has changed things because once it's out there, it's out there. There's no editorial control. You can't. It's very difficult to sue Facebook or Twitter for being defamed by somebody on there. It's and I'm not suggesting it should be easy. I think people are free to say any stupid thing they like. But we're living in this transition period when people still they're actually treating social media in the same way they treated the Times back in 1950. As it progresses and shifts in a generation, we'll say, well, I'll be more polite, but Mr. Lionhelm used to say, opinions are like backsides, everyone's got one. And the difference is now that opinion can be broadcast throughout the world without any editorial control. Now that might be a good thing, but we're in that lag. We're in that lag between having had a view that said, well, we have journalists and they're experts and they know what they're doing and they're fair, which no one believes now, and actually having this situation where anyone can put anything they like out there. But what is clear is that, well, for me, if the High Court had not overturned the conviction, not because of who he is or what the alleged crime was, but because he was clearly convicted on one person's evidence, where there was reasonable doubt of circumstances, of other people saying he was elsewhere, of the impossibility of the time frame, even on the plaintiff's account, solely on their account, no time for him to have committed that crime. If that had been upheld by the High Court, I think I'd have moved back to England.
Well,
how can anybody get a fair trial if that's the case? It's and like I say,
media.
Yeah, and when it's somebody you don't like, this is true of in politics as well. When someone says something, if we dismiss what they've said because we don't like them or because of who they represent, one of them said, on the live feed, I saw his collar, it put me off. Okay, fine, but they stuck around to hear what I had to say. That's what you're supposed to do. If you just say, well, actually, if you say everything this person ever says is wrong, that can never be a true statement.
Yeah, 100%.
So, the problem is that we deal with caricatures, and there's nothing new about that. My goodness me, read the gospel. The idea of a scapegoat, read the entire Bible. The idea of a scapegoat is all out there. Everybody knows it, and there's been various scapegoats throughout the ages. Now, that is what was being thrown upon Cardinal Pell, but he was really only being tried for the specific charges that had been laid against him. But unfortunately, the media didn't want that to be the story.
Yeah, and that's the worst part about all of this is,
and that's not respectful to victims, by the way. That's not respectful to people who've been abused. That serves nobody. Well,
and it's as a good reflection, it becomes the boy who cried wolf. If people are making accusations with no founding, it does diminish those people who are true victims. I'm not saying this particular case, but across the board, if you claim to be a victim of anything,
the police should listen to all of them and investigate all of them. Because somebody might have cried wolf, but actually then they were abused. So I'm not into this whole, don't listen to people because they've got a history of, telling lies. I think if somebody makes an allegation, but it's got to be properly and thoroughly investigated without any of that malice. I mean, the notion that the police would advertise in a newspaper for people to make allegations against a person, I don't see how that can be without fear or favour. If I went round to where you live, Dean, and knocked on all of your next door neighbours' doors, as a policeman, I'll put my policeman's hat back on, and I knock on all your neighbours' doors, I've never had any allegation made against you, right? I've just decided, as a policeman, I don't like you, and I'm going to knock on everybody's door and try and find some misdemeanour to charge you with. Oh, well, actually, yeah, he dropped litter out of his bin once. All right, here's a ticket for littering. That is not legitimate police action.
No.
Now, don't get me wrong. If I was walking down the street as a policeman and you were throwing rubbish out of your bin onto the footpath, that is legitimate police action.
Of course.
But to go fishing for something that's not apparent, that's not. And so, I think there has to be serious questions asked about how Victoria Police go about the business of police work, how prosecutors go about assessing cases. And it just seemed to me that in such a rush to convict somebody, the appropriate questions were not asked and proper investigations were not followed through. Now, we're talking about Cardinal Pell. Who knows how many other people are in this category?
100%.
How many other people are in prisons in Victoria because things weren't investigated properly? So forget about Cardinal Pell. The question is, are they fit for purpose? Can they investigate things properly? Are they interested in establishing the truth through evidence?
Fair, true, justice.
They're the only question.
Yeah.
And actually, if they're not, then we're not free. We live in a tyranny, if that's the case.
Which I'd speculate we're heading in that direction, which scares the pants off me. But look, Father Chris, I think that's probably going to be fantastic summation. Sometimes my English is as good as it should
It's
be.
only my layman's view looking in, But,
of course, but your perspective as both a Catholic priest, a former policeman, and a Manchester United fan, I think it gives a great perspective and an alternative perspective to the usual drivel on mainstream media that just shoots before it asks any questions. So thank you for your time and your honesty, of course. And hopefully, again, we'll be able to catch up next week.
Okay. Cheers, Dean.
Thanks, Father Chris. Appreciate it.
Hey guys, if you have enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe to Resolute TV and click the bell, and be sure to subscribe and to click on all of our guests today. They have lots to offer, and we will see you next time on Resolute TV. Thanks for watching, guys.